Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's begin our business of shaping policy for today by looking at the impact of the telecom industry, the evolution that's taking place in that industry, and also look at the contribution of that industry to the global economy as the world celebrates the World Telecom Day. To shed more light on this, we are being joined by an expert. We are being joined by Seyi Akindeide, who is the founder Hyperspace Neural AI. Seyi, glad you have joined us this morning.
Thank you again for having me. Good morning.
Yeah,
good
good to
morning.
see you again.
Good morning, viewers. Yes.
Good to see you again. You know, when you come around like this, it's time to talk about tech.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's always very interesting.
Absolutely.
So let's get techie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's bring it on.
Now, looking at the evolution of, telecom industry in Nigeria, I started with, GSM in the 2000, where, that became the rave of the moment. And now we're in 2024, and on a special day like this, where the world is focusing on that industry, give us a background to what you feel has been the evolution over the years, and then the trends that has taken place and the state we have globally when it comes to telecom.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a good introductory question. Okay, so obviously we'll see that before even the advent of telecoms, even in Nigeria, you see that time it was landline to the ratio of landline to population was like 1 in a maybe like 10 million. But these days, some people even carry 2 mobile phones. So we've seen that over the years, it has come to stay. It has come to take us out. In fact, it's almost as if we have leapfrog, into the stratosphere. So any regular person, your malam, your driver, your house help, they all carry mobile phones that enable communication. And every time you have things like that, it usually changes the economic status of a human being. So we've seen it from, like you said, from around about 1999, 2000, when the telcos and the telecoms industry started. We started with data. Most people we started with voice. So it was more about being able to communicate, being able to talk, to people, being able to call. Obviously, I remember before the advent of telecom, if I wanted to come and pay a visit to your house, I wouldn't know whether you are around or not. I'll take the risk, going, traffic, use fuel, and then I get to your house and then I discover that you're not there. These days, it has cut a lot of those things down. And then obviously from there, we moved from voice, and the normal, those entry-level phones. Now everybody's carrying smartphone. In fact, you find out that voice right now is just a little percentage of what we see. We see more of data, we see more video, now. So that's been the evolution. It's actually been it's sort of like a wonderful experience that we've had, and obviously the government that brought it in must also take a lot of credit, especially for this part of the world.
So now that we've have significant improvement in communication, so it's no longer telecommunication, it's now ICT, because there is the information part and it's now digital. What can you say about what the benefit has brought on various spheres of life, from education to business and even to daily relationship?
Oh, it has completely transformed the way we operate. And one of the case studies that most times I use is just 4 years ago when we had the outbreak of COVID-19, and nobody could do and it took us by surprise. Like, I imagine how we would have gone about it without these pieces of devices and the internet. It would have been completely difficult. It was just one day they announced lockdown and there was nobody that planned for it. Some people just had maybe like 24, 48 hours to plan for it, and all of a sudden we had to just be indoors. But guess what? It enabled ideas. It enabled people to now come up with other so that's when we had the advent of this delivery. You can order things online, you can order biscuits online, you can order sweets online, and then people will come and deliver right to your. And then a lot of people also started thinking of imagining things. I remember that time too, the guy that used to come to do laundry. I couldn't all of a sudden do that, but he just set up a WhatsApp direct line where you can just send him. Okay, he will come when when they've given us around that 5 to the following day, pick up your clothes, go bring it back. without that, I'm not sure anybody will have been able to do anything because it was just so impromptu. So that's a wonderful case study of how we have moved, almost as if we've moved from dark ages, into the light. So it has enabled a lot of communication. I mean, right now, back again these days, it has even allowed enterprises, organizations, and corporations to think of more ways to use employees' time. Now we are seeing that some people don't even go to the offices any longer. They work from home. Why? It was the advent of that COVID where people now realize that, there are some things that you can actually do without visiting the office. We're now all using Zoom to communicate. So I can be here and I can be having a meeting, in my office. So it's cutting down a lot of on those necessary expenses, unnecessary trips where people will sit in traffic for ages and hours, before getting to work. We're now being more productive. Once you have access to, the device and the internet, you can work from anywhere. You can be on the beach and be working and be productive. So it has really, and it has moved us, several light years, ahead. And I'm sure that going forward, we'll even see a lot. In fact, they are now saying that some organizations are even talking about having 4-day work week, 3-day work week, because, of the advent of this technology, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon.
I agree with you. The telecom industry has come a long way. I could imagine if we still have that template now where if you needed to make call, you have to be in a building like this. Interestingly, this building has something to do with the history of telecom in Nigeria. So, but the question is, on a day like this, which is quite significant, why do you think it's important to have a special day like this for World Telecom Day? And on a day like this, what are the critical issues you feel that attention should be drawn to, critical issues that affect the industry, that attention should be given to on a day like this?
Oh, fantastic. It's actually very important to have days to mark occasions like this telecom, because when you have days like this, it now enables policy makers and decision makers to come and say, okay, let's take stock of where we were and where we are now and where we want to be, and then obviously sit down and compare ourselves with what other global organizations or countries are doing as regards telecom. So it's very important for one to mark it. And some of the issues, like you said, if you go to yes, in this part of the world, this part of the country, southwest, and we're good. We have permeation of telecom devices, data, internet. But if you go to some other areas, you find out that some of these things have not yet seeped in. Some of these things, there's still that digital divide. There's still that gap that is missing, And part of it is the economic power of people. Not everybody can afford some of these, high-end devices that we use. Yes, they have the normal phones, but that can do voice and text, but they haven't had access to this because their economic power hasn't gotten that. So there's still that digital divide. Another area where we're seeing is the rate of literacy, because for you to use some of these devices, you need people that are literate. You need people that can, so that is still there. I mean, it was brought to the light. We had a colleague of mine went up north just to do some awareness on, and we discovered that even before you can do awareness, because we are, primarily on cybersecurity, but before you can talk about cybersecurity and how to protect your device and all that, people actually need to be using it. And we got there and we saw that there are certain sorts of people that don't even have access to these things. They've never been onto the internet. They have really never been onto the internet. So you're wondering, there's still a long way to go. And I think that's where government efforts should be put. Maybe sort of like engaging some of these providers to go to some of those places set up, even if it's pro bono, at no cost, so that people can get onto the internet. People can start to see that a farmer in the north can start to see that I can put my crops online, and I'll get somebody from the southwest here to buy it, and then you ship it down. Those are some of the things that we need to start doing. So there's still a lot of gaps in that regard, as opposed in terms of their economic power, in terms of the literacy rate, and of course when there is now low literacy, adoption becomes very, very, very low. And some of them, because of that, they really don't trust these devices. A lot of them are still manual communication. So those are some of the challenges that we've seen, and we think that. And then another thing is government policy, because sometimes you see that some of these policies are stifling They need to reduce, especially in new technologies like this, they need to reduce the complexity of the policy. Let people use it, and then over time you start to adjust the policy, and then the policy shouldn't be one rule fits all. There has to be, in a place where you don't even have penetration, you can't be putting a restrictive policy. So when that policy is reduced, people will get more online, they will trust the process more, and then it will become better. So those are some of the things that we think that government can do.
Okay, let's take a look at how far Nigeria has come in terms of communication. So in 2001, GSM, Global System for Mobile Communication, arrived in Nigeria, and at that time there were just very few players. So people needed to buy SIMs and then get connected. There wasn't even the internet aspect; it was just for voice and messaging that people could do, and it was very expensive. Very few persons had access to that. Now, several years down the line, we find that the internet part of it was introduced, and so you have so many persons being connected to it. But in terms of service delivery, in terms of internet penetration, how far do you think Nigeria has come?
Oh, we have actually come very, very far. I mean, if you look at where we were and where we are, it is a complete transformation. I mean, it's almost like I always say, telecom services and internet services is a level playing field. It completely levels everything. Before now, I mean, back in the day, maybe around about 1995, we'll be hearing that, oh, the so country, they have a taxi driver carrying phones. Only in Nigeria we don't have. And then we had this thing, the first set of phone lines that came, mobile phones that were very expensive that time, maybe like 300,000. You'll be hearing there's only one politician that is using these expensive phones. And then when I was in school, there was even things like fire lines where you could call but you could receive, but you couldn't dial. But now, coming from there, it is a complete transformation. I mean, if you think about how what it has enabled. 4 years ago, we heard a lot of these payment companies they set up, and they were bought by international companies. Why? Because we now have internet, we now have e-commerce, we now have digital services that people can now. It has completely transformed the way. Yes, there are still the challenges, there are still the bottlenecks, there's still and obviously with this kind of technology is also going to accentuate the negative aspect. So if you notice that over time now, people are no longer, before, when we're younger, you used to hear of, bank arm robberies, like if people go to the bank and but right now, because the internet is there, it's giving all those fraudsters to a medium to actually, perpetrate whatever they want to do. So, in as much as it has given us hope and it has transformed us, there's also that negative aspect. And then, like I said before, there are still certain pockets of locations, that where the penetration hasn't actually reached. Yeah, people carry phones, but you see, it's not the. I see people that are using the small screen phone that you can only call and send message. But if you see where the world is going, is shifting from voice to data. You find out that a lot of people use more of data, more of texting, WhatsApp, and all these messaging systems than even calling, because it's even more because they are store and forward. Now, if I call you and you don't pick up, I can send you a message. Even if you can't read it at that point, I know that when you're free, you would actually see the message. So you will not miss any message. So that's where it is moving towards now. And what is enabling that? Infrastructure. So we still need a lot more of that infrastructure, to be built by the providers. We need a lot more penetration in certain, areas. And then the service delivery has to also improve, because as more people are coming, they are choking the system, they are overpowering the system. And sometimes you have things like call drops, you have slow internet connections, you have, a lot of things that don't work. So they need to just up the, infrastructure level, and then I'm sure that it will improve after that.
Now, let's look at the theme for today, which is digital innovation for sustainable development. Now, my question is, how do we create that synergy between the opportunities provided by technology and towards achieving the SDG goals. You're aware there are about 17 of them. The essence of that is to look at how to deploy technology towards, helping achieving these goals, which has to do with health, poverty, eradicating poverty, tackling the issue of health, climate change. Now, as an expert in their field, how do we deploy technology towards solving these problems to make the world a better place?
We have to, a lot of people that are practicing in those fields, health, agriculture, and all this, they are practicing the old way, the way they were taught, the way they have always done it. So we now need a new generation of vibrant people who are also in that field to say, look, gone are the days when you are doing manual farming or manual cultivation or manual health. When you go to some of these villages, you still see that they are not using these digital services. So I think one of the things I think we can do is leverage this NYSC scheme. So for instance, instead of there's a lot that needs to change. So instead of saying that you post people willy-nilly so if, let's say, I have gone to school and I have read medicine, and I know that there are certain parts of the country that need medical, help, instead of just posting people, say, oh, just go, you look at all the people that have graduated with medicine and you tell them, look, we're going to be using telemedicine. Now, because these people are graduating in modern times, they know how to use all these devices. They will go with the knowledge they have. Now, they can now interface with the people on ground there to say, look, gone are the days when you are just doing things without thinking. Now you have data, so they can help them with data. Like, for instance, if you go to a certain village, how do you know whether to deploy certain kinds of medical equipment there? So if an NYC person goes there with this help, he can now start to take, okay, what is the number of pregnant women we have here? How often do they get pregnant? What are the challenges they are facing? What is the quality of water they are drinking? You start to have data about these things. It takes somebody who is modern, who can use all these services to go there and put all these things together to start to help those people to say, okay, federal government, I think instead of deploying malaria drugs to this place, they don't often suffer from malaria, but we have a lot of infant mortality rate. We have a lot of, failed pregnancies. We have a lot of people that need antenatal. So this is what we need, and you back it up with data. That's what, we need to start to use these digital services for. We need to start depending on data. Without it, we're just going to be guessing. And for that to happen, we need modern people. The people there that are currently, they will not do it because they are used to, using native intelligence. But now we can now start to use. So those are some of the areas. Even things like agriculture. A lot of people are still there's digital. People are using AI now to find. For instance, now I know someone who's developed an app for you to know when your crops are bad. Once you take a picture of it, it will automatically tell you, oh, this thing is spoiled or this is not. So we need to start using those kind of services, IoT, Internet of Things, to measure temperature, to measure. Those are the things that we can use, this technology for. Then, of course, for you to do that, then you now also have to. People lack trust. So if you just deploy someone to that area and say, you have to sensitize the people. You have to let them know that this is what the technology brings to the table. This is what you can do with it. This is how it can help you. Technology is a lever. It gives you leverage. There are things that without it will take years and years and you may never even achieve. But with technology, with these digital devices, it shortens the time it takes to achieve something. So those are some of the challenges we're facing: sensitization, education, awareness. We need to spend more time on that, and that's how we can now, all these sustainable development goals, we can now start to achieve them one by one. And once people start to see that it's affecting their lives, it's making them economic. At the end of the day, it's about the economics. It's about my pocket. It's about their pocket. It's about what is bringing to the table for them. Once they start to see these things, then they start to adopt it more, and then it permeates and it spreads. And that's how we can get to that sustainable development goal.
All right, looking at using digital innovation to bring about sustainable development. The financial sector seems to have done very well in that aspect. Now, for other sectors like agriculture, you mentioned that some of them still do things the old way. Now, what kind of infrastructure would be needed to ensure that every other sector is following and moving along with the trend?
Good, thank you very much. They can use the template of the financial sector to drive it. Even the financial sector that we're talking about today, it didn't come easy. It was very difficult the financial sector is actually even more difficult than other sectors because it has to do with money. And if you remember at the beginning, it didn't come so easy as well because people didn't adopt it when I remember the first ATM and, people didn't go there and this is my money. What if, and I remember even some of the teething problems it had, say you some people that will go to ATM, your money will not come out, it will debit you, the fraud that was happening, the security incidents, the magnetic stripe, and a lot of all those things. But guess what happened? It was a top-down thing. It was policy driven. There was a time when we had a CBN governor who said we were going cashless. And there was nothing we were going to do about it. And they made sure that they did, it wasn't just about saying we'll go cashless and then imposing it on people. They went about sensitizing. They went all over the country. They deployed people. They were going to market women. They were going to universities. They were going to schools, secondary schools. They were going to, very local people to tell them this, and then they gave them the equipment, POS terminals, free, and then they were giving them incentives as well, that okay, if you do this, this is what would happen. They set up consumer protection to in case fraud and all that. The same thing needs to happen in all those industries. You need to have an overarching policy that would say, okay, if we want, and then we need to tackle it one at a time. Look at the critical segments, maybe agriculture, maybe health, those ones, or maybe, even things like transportation. Okay, even now we can see that even in transportation, we are seeing some developments in there where instead of having to pay cash, you just tap your phone, you get onto the train and the bus and all that. So we can start to do a lot of that as well. It's going to take a lot of work. We need the right person there, and we need the belief that this thing would work. And then what usually at the end of the day, when there is no adoption for these things, what usually happens is it ends up with the people. It's the people that we need to take on board. So if you want to do it for agriculture, you want to actually tell them we can use some of these digital tools, then we get to the farmers, we get to the people producing these crops. We let them see that this thing can actually change, the way they do things. And then you get from there, they now start to adopt it. And obviously, like you said again, there needs to be that infrastructure, because once the people are so averse to technology, even with the financial system you're talking about, there's some people that are still averse to it. You still go to some ATMs and some people will still give you their card and their PIN and say, I don't know how to operate this thing, please. But because it has to do with money and they have no choice, So, and that's why we still have a lot of fraud. Despite that, people are still using it. They didn't cancel it. So that's the same thing. We just need to use that template and, modify it and adapt it for any other, sector that we want to. And then I think we'll be able to get to the targets.
Let's look at one of the critical goals for sustainable development, which is us to eradicate poverty by the year 2030. Now, how do we deploy digital innovations towards ending the issue of or achieving, eradicating poverty or tackling the issue of unemployment in Nigeria?
That's a tough one, because it has to do with the human mindset. We're averse to change. We just like what we have been doing, and it works. We continue to do it. So there needs to, for us to do that, there's a lot that government and the policymakers, apart from setting the policy and trying to impose it on people, there's a lot they can do in terms of giving incentives, to people. If you go to how other countries are doing it, in fact, I know that there's some countries where, in order to encourage digital usage, there are some things that they say, okay, if you pay with your phone, maybe you take 50% discount off, So it will enable people to bring upon this, So for us to achieve the to eradicate poverty by 2030, the first thing is actually education and awareness. So we need to spend a lot of time. We in this part of the world, sometimes we judge the whole by the part. So if you're in Lagos and maybe Abuja and Port Harcourt, you will think that is how every other place is. Until you now get to certain places where they have never even seen a smartphone. They don't even know what. So when you see, that's why I was watching. Even in Lagos, there was a time just 2 weeks ago I was watching on the news where I don't know, maybe is it the customs? They seized some drones and some USB drives, and they were saying that, oh, this thing is going to, and I'm thinking to myself, no, there's a time, even in this country, there was a time, I think about 10 or 15 years ago, I was coming from a customer side with a hard drive. When you take a hard drive off a computer, and the policeman stopped me and he saw the hard drive and he said, this is a bomb. And I'm like, are you for real? Because there's a lack of awareness. There's a lack of, even now, any young man that you see carrying a laptop, they automatically think you are Yahoo. So a lot of that has to change. A lot of that thinking has to, and we need education. We need at all levels. At senior level, at mid level, at low, especially at the local level, to let them know that this technology is meant to be used. And because a lot of these people don't have access to it, it will boil down to having an incentive to make these things cheap. If we had a Nigerian company manufacturing a lot of these phones cheaply, and it is in the hands of everybody, it will be very, very easy. Because once you put this thing in the hands of people, they will want to use it. They will want to find a way to use it. That's why the financial system is very easy, because I don't think there's any financial institution that doesn't have a mobile app. So when you have it and you have the mobile, you will be forced to use it. Back in the day, we'd all go to the bank to queue, but now we don't do that. So that's what needs to change. We need a lot of sensitization. We need a lot of awareness. We need a lot of capacity building across board. It has to be a deliberate effort. Without it, I don't think we're going to eradicate, because poverty starts from the mind. It is not physical. Once you can liberate the mind, you don't even have to have the cash. But you know that as I'm going out today, I can use my skills to earn money. It is the mind. But once the mind is warped, it doesn't matter how much you give the person is still going to, it's not about physical, it's about the intellectual capacity. So we need to build on that, and we need to go. There is a lot happening. I think the National Youth Service can be used as a channel through which you can eradicate poverty. Because now you have a mixture of people that are educated in the new modern time with these facilities. Some of them, they have grown up. Some of them have never known any other thing apart from, digital services. And you get them, you take them to those places, they educate people, and then we can eradicate poverty.
All right. Some African countries have actually been able to use technology, use digital innovation to drive development. Talk about countries like Rwanda, even Nigeria, South Africa, and so many other African countries. But let's look at the aspect of upskilling, and even using it to create local solutions. Now, when we talk about sustainable development, Femi has mentioned one of them, which is to eradicate poverty. There is also the part that talks about attending to climate change issue. So how can we have local solutions? We have tech people all over Africa, but are they providing local solutions to local problems in the aspect of attending to the climate and other issues faced in Africa?
We can do more. We are trying, the people here, but obviously, for you to try, there has to be an enabling environment, which is essentially what we don't have. If you look at, like you said, the countries that are doing it, the government is making it easy. They're giving policies that would enable someone who is straight out of school to say, well, instead of going to work in a bank or for government, I have this idea to create, like we have power challenges in Nigeria. There's so many people trying to do all this solar, But if you find out that if you want to buy those solar, a lot of the components of the battery or are still imported. They're not made here. And because the person who is bringing it in will say, look, it's cheaper for me to bring these things in than for me to, create them here. So one of the things government needs to do is to equip some of these higher institutions, especially maybe the technical polytechnics, to say, if you're going to study it, we'll give you incentives. You can create this. You can, because for you to solve the problem of this climate change, it's not just going to be about an individual. Even if I have an idea, there needs to be an enabling environment for local people to thrive. And obviously, with this whole jackpot syndrome, that people just automatically believe that, look, Nigeria isn't going to give me that playing field, except the people that we see coming back are people that have spent a lot of their time abroad and they have something to offer. They don't really need the government. But how many of those people can we have? So again, it starts from government policy to say, reduce. Maybe if I want to, I'm in an industry where I want to tackle climate change, maybe give me certain incentives, maybe tax incentives, maybe opportunities, maybe things that you give me, or maybe there's a park that I can go to. I get an office free, I get internet free, I get a computer free, and or some of these things are subsidized. But without that, we're just going to be running around in circles, and the people with the brain would find out that, look, even if you have it here, what is the capacity of economic capacity, buying power of the local that would make me break even? It's not, I just don't want to do it, and then I'm not an NGO, so that's the problem that we face. There are these ideas, but if you can't implement them due to government policy, it becomes a bit difficult. Even just last week with this technology we're talking about, there was reports, I think there are about, I don't know how many POS terminal holders. These are people that are using it for like secondary business. So you have to go and register with CAC. It's not free. So you're telling me that a local person would have to go and pay money to a lawyer to get a CAC registration, and then you have to start taxing the person. I think some of these policies have to be, they have to be less restrictive, so that people can get on board. And then when it has now permeated, then we can now bring them to a round table and then say, okay, well, now these are things that we need to start doing. So government policy is one of the things that needs to happen, favorable government policy.
Now let's focus on Nigeria now, because it's also important while having a day like this to talk about our space and what should be done to make it better. Let's look at these issues of, you have issues of cable cord, the issue of infrastructural issues that has to deal with the Nigerian space. Talk to us. At a point, we were talking about 5G network, which has been the conversation. But where the issue lies is the issue of commercializing it. Talk to us. What has been the issues around infrastructural development in that industry? Then what is the latest development as regards 5G? And then what should be done to ensure that issues related to infrastructure in the industry is made better than the way it used to be?
Again, the infrastructure to set up these things are not cheap. And if you see these companies that are doing it, they are actually investing, a lot. So again, it boils down to, the government policy giving them some kind of subventions, because it is, a businessman doesn't want to put money and not have return on investment. So they want to be sure that, there is return on investment. And part of the challenge is also, you cannot, take away the economic factors from even that. So even things like currency devaluation would affect those people, because you're bringing in a lot of these equipment. We don't manufacture them. If we're manufacturing them, it would be a different case. But we don't have a telco in equipment manufacturing industry in Nigeria. So a lot of these things still have to be shipped in, and then when they ship them in, and maybe, last year when you ship in a product, it was at one cost, your currency has devalued, and now, so it's going to make it a lot more expensive for the providers to offer these services to the locals. So the only way it can permit is if the cost unit economics, really comes down. So that's some of the challenges. You talk about the problems with infrastructure and all these cable cuts and all that. Anytime you have infrastructure like this, you find out that there will be issues. There will be, like the last time we had this cable cut was undersea, and they said there was a ship that was passing, and when they wanted to throw the anchor, it went and it broke a cable, and they had to start fixing it. And sometimes you will realize that, okay, that was a physical infrastructure. Sometimes it's cybersecurity issues. In fact, there have been situations where there've been denial of service attacks on some of these providers, and you are not able to have access. So in doing that, cybersecurity has to be number one. It has to be first and foremost protecting this equipment, because as they call them, critical national infrastructure, protecting them from hackers, from even invaders. I mean, what's to say that other, nation states aren't trying to target, our infrastructure? How do we know that? So we need to have a lot of which, about two weeks ago or so, there was this issue of levy that will be going, this 0.5% cybersecurity levy that will be going to the NSA for the protection of this thing that people now, raised alarm over, and then obviously I think they've reversed that now. So those are some of the things that we're saying the cost needs to come down. And then there needs to be an incentive mechanism in place for local production. There is absolutely, I don't think we've gotten to a level where now I don't think there shouldn't be any in Nigeria here manufacturing a lot of these routers, switches, the cables we use, the phones we use, because it's only when you do that locally that you can have those unit economics, completely, come down to people, and then you can, permeate. Because at the end of the day, this device to me, honestly, is pretty much useless if I cannot communicate with it. So that's where we need it's. With that, I mean, I don't think there's anybody that carries any phone now that it doesn't have data, because you find out that you cannot really do anything with it. And for that to happen, we need a lot more of these people to come in. We need a lot more, and then the ISP, the providers too, also need to step up their game. They need to, they need to provide these services, as at when due, not just when it's convenient for them. So they need to up the service level. They need to up, their cybersecurity protection of all these things, and then the data that they are holding. So I think that's probably, how what we can do in our local environment here, to help push the digital agenda forward.
All right, before we move away from World Telecommunication and Information Day, let's refer to the interview we just watched with the MD of Broad-Based Communications. Now, he talked about having a facility that can perform 5,000 transactions in seconds. Now, and how that improved profit. So, ending, he said that we're in a trajectory where human intervention has been less needed. Is that supposed to be good news, or supposed to sound like a threat to those who are in the ICT sector? Now, how does one turn it, or how would companies turn it to advantages? Does Nigeria, for instance, have what it needs to turn that into advantage? Having capacity, being able to embrace and utilize that capacity.
Yes, I think it's not a threat; it's actually an advantage to people, because every technology, yes, while it will take away some jobs, some low-level jobs, but it will create some high-level ones. It will make people, when we now deploy people, we're now deploying people more for their creativity and problem-solving skills, as opposed to, so when he said that they deployed a technology that has improved their, transaction base and even their profitability, it is true. If you look at, let me give you an example of, a very good use case for technology. When, maybe like 20 years ago, if you write JAMP and you wanted to, go and check your results, on the day the result is going to come out, the JAMP office was in Ikoyi. You see the students, maybe 3,000, 4,000 of them will cram the whole place just because they wanted to check the exam. This was a major problem to JAMP at the time. So what did they do? They deployed technology. What is it? They said, go to our website, buy a recharge card for 500 naira, you scratch it, you put in the code on our website, and your results will come out. What has that done? It has decongested the entire, front office of the JAMP office. And obviously, somebody who has written an exam would obviously want to check his results. Guess what? Through deployment of technology, I don't know the number of people that write JAMP every year, maybe like 2 million people buying 500 naira recharge card. That's a huge revenue base for them. in Nigeria. So that's how you can use technology to leverage and do transaction and become more profitable even for yourself. That's just in one use case. There's so many other use cases that we can find. So deploying technology is an overall positive because it's not going to free up the human being to do more intellectually tasking things. Yes, there are some jobs that would obviously be lost, but there are jobs because when you create technology, somebody has to create the technology. Somebody has to manage the technology. Somebody has to administer the technology. So those people that were at that role before, they now, they now become more valuable. It's a bit like we can't run away from technology. Back in the day as well, if you look at Nigeria, why were we having a lot of traffic? Because you put policemen at certain or traffic warders, those yellow fever people that we used to call them, they'll be directing traffic. And this was so inefficient. What happened? They deployed technology, street lights. Traffic lights came about. So you just put technology, and then those people controlling the traffic on the field, they now go back in, and they're not the ones pushing the buttons, controlling the but they've upped their skill to be able to do a lot of these things. So while they were taken off the street, they were deployed somewhere else to implement and manage, this traffic light that now, automatically by itself, whether rain, sunshine, it works, as long as there's power to it. That's what technology will do. So it is not a case of we should be scared that technology is going to come and take the role, because as human beings, we progress. It is only through, without technology, it's only through that technology that we can advance the cause. Imagine if there was no mobile phone. Imagine if, you can't do things remotely. Like now, you can the interview. You see some interviews that you'll be here, you interview somebody who is in America or who is in the UK or who is in Abuja, and you'll be able to project that into the studio. It's technology. But guess what? We have people still managing the technology. It's not going to do away with the interviewer. It's not going to do away with the cameraman. It's not going to do away with the producer. But what we'll now see is that what you will need will now be more, what the human being will now be doing will now be more, advanced and higher.
All right, let's see how we can bring this in before we wrap up. You're aware of the effort being made by the CBA and the controversy trailing for bank customers to provide their social media handles as part of what you call KYC initiative, Know Your Customers initiative. To provide a background to this, a Lagos lawyer has approached the Federal High Court, and the court ruled that, held that the CBN has the constitutional right to ask for or demand for social media handles from bank customers. How do you react to this?
It's a bit funny because is that I personally I think that's an overreach of this central bank. I don't know where people ask for personal, because when you have a social media handle, it's personal to you. You don't share. It's like saying those are things that are personal. And then secondly, it raises questions on privacy. There's this privacy protection. Okay, so if you have my social media, how do I trust that you're going to use the data, very well? It's my personal, in my way of interacting with the world. Some people they use pseudonyms. Some people don't even use their real names on some of these social media. They don't even use their real pictures. It's just for them to be able to contribute. Some people have ideas and they don't want the world to tie the idea to them. So how do you navigate, that? And then also leads to things like, I think, is also going to lead to things like profiling people. So if I'm an advocate of one political party, and because I'm not supporting you, and then are you going to deprive me of services? So it's going to lead to a lot of those issues, and then it's even going to be burdensome on the banks and the fintechs. How many social media handles and does an average Nigerian have? Maybe you have 10. Are you going to start looking at each one? It's going to be real, burden for these organizations to be able to do this. I'm a different. If you go to some people, you're a different person maybe on WhatsApp than you are on Facebook, than you are on Twitter, than you are on Instagram, than you are on YouTube. How are you going to marry all those things? Some people have more than one, social media. How are you going to do a lot of all those things? So I think it's an overreach of regulation. The social media shouldn't be, especially when it's not like so what happens if another social media platform comes, and are you going to do? No, I think what we should do is what the KYC we're already using in terms of NIN and BVN and all these things. They are already okay, because your mobile phone is your mobile phone, your NIN is your NIN. You really don't need, you can only when things like that, when you now have to probably investigate cases, then that's when you can start to look at somebody's social media handle, but not before as part of KYC. I think that law, I don't know, it should be a bit, relaxed. Even the implementation is going to be so hectic for a lot of these organizations, and I don't know how they will handle it, to be frank. So that's my opinion on that issue.
If there's another layer of protection the bank is asking for social media handles of customers, now what does this say about the security measures put in place? At first, you have the NIN, you have the BVN, and then all the different measures that the bank has oftentimes put in place. What does it say about them? If they didn't work as protection for customers or protection against theft and other fraud that could happen with bank information, what is the guarantee that this, since the court is giving approval for them to go ahead, what is the guarantee that this would ensure protection?
There are no guarantees. You don't have the guarantee. Nobody, there are no, if NIN and BVN that is centralized, that is under the control of, the BVN is issued by the banks, NIN is by the government. And if those are not working, you want to say, it just means that even that is the very nature of humans will just, some of the people that have social media will probably start deleting them, or will start, so it's not a guarantee that your protection mechanism is now going to somehow work, or it's going to lessen the fraud, or it's going to lessen the issues what they should do is tighten up the loose ends. If you go to America, they only have social security number. With that number, they know everything about you. They don't even need to know your because social media is personal. If you're trying to tell me that I cannot have a personal opinion because I'm afraid that I might be profiled due to certain things that my beliefs, or my political leanings, or my affiliations with certain things, then it's going to hinder the growth of whatever they want to use it for. So I think, since social media should not be, I don't think it should be taken into consideration. They need to just tighten up, these loose ends of using NIN. With NIN, I don't even think there should be any other thing, because NIN is on your passport. You cannot run away. It's tied to your mobile phone, So with that, with your same registration, with your NIN, with your BVN, I think they have enough information there to be able to tackle whatever. I think on the part of the investigator, I think it's there's technology in place, because if you see the justification for it is, people are, this kidnapping and things and all that, but there are monitoring systems in place that you can put to monitor IP addresses of people that are committing fraud. So instead of monitoring social security number, why don't you liaise with the telcos to know? They all have CDRs called detailed records. They have where you are going. They have logs of people. If you do that, then you'll be able to, do your forensic investigation on any internet theft.
All right, we just have to leave the conversation here. Seyi, when you're around, we're always tempted to always see, perhaps to expand the conversation and say we'll continue, but we'll always create another time. We must thank you for your time. Let's hope maybe someone will go to a higher court to contest this, maybe the stakeholders. Let's see how it plays out. But we must thank you for your time and your thoughts on this development.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.